What's happening, guys? And welcome back to another Sunday Scan. We have two guests this week. We're trying something new. So we have Nick and we have Cody. Thank you guys for joining me. We have a lot of good stuff to cover. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for having
Good.
us. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
Yeah, we've had some good feedback lately, and one of the things is that there's so many different styles really in the room that it's nice to be able to feature that in some places outside of the room because we have people who trade large caps, small caps, short bias, long bias, options. Crypto. We have so many different styles. So what we're going to try to do is, if the market's running a certain way, we're going to try to have people on who are good at that kind of market, and so that's what we're going to do this week. So we'll kick things off with just a little bit of market talk. And for me personally, this has been an interesting market, and I feel like it's really just digesting. And that's kind of like the word that comes to mind because we've had so much data over the last week or two. We kind of had a correction, 5 or 6% correction. We had stuff with inflation ramping back up. We had the FOMC. We've had economic data. We had bond yields. We had earnings season. We just had so much happening that I feel like the market was just churning in place, trying to pick a direction. It was kind of, ramping up against the upside, flushing down, and really just like trying to find its footing somewhere in the middle. And now that we're kind of past a lot of that data, I think that the market's just soaking it in, and now it's going to pick a direction, hopefully over the next week or couple of weeks. And so that's really what I've been noticing. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about, just kind of knowing the key variables to look at to get like a read on the market of like what is actually impacting it. And that was things like, the Middle East headlines. Those were definitely impacting the market. Bond yields, in my opinion, those are definitely impacting the market. What the Fed is saying, that impacts it. And then also some of the big sectors like AI, big tech, like those with earnings, that impacts the market. And then for myself, I look at financials because that's a big component of the S&P. And so just kind of getting a feel on all those things really helps me to, for myself in my own trading, try to calibrate where the market's at, where am I at? And so given all that, I think that we're digesting. So that's what I've been noticing. Nick, what have you been noticing in this kind of market? Any themes? What have you been paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think I would try to simplify things a little more in terms of I think that we saw a lot of volatility because of what was going over in the Middle East. And people were uncertain, unsure. The market didn't really know how to react. And I have to say, like, as somebody with a little bit of an inside scoop there, I mean, I was on a flight to Lebanon at a point before I got pulled back, and that was just a week ago. But I was able to understand that this wasn't going to escalate as much as people might think. And I was able to take long positions in things that I think other people might have been scared to. So it played to my benefit, And again, I mean, I'm in the military, so it's a little bit of an inside scoop that I knew that it wasn't really going to escalate in the way that a lot of people thought it did or would. But being able to recognize patterns and the market doesn't go straight up or go straight down. There's a lot of squiggles in between. And you have to be able to not only change your bias, but flip your bias on a dime. And if you think the world's going, to hell, war in the Middle East, crazy things happening all over America, you can take short positions and then wake up today and you're like, how did we get here, right? But I think as a trader, you have to enter every day bias-free. Completely bias free, because the market has such a short memory from day to day that you really just need to be prepared for any type of action, whether that be a huge up move or a huge down move. You always need to have your list of stocks that you're willing to buy on the upside or willing to short on the downside.
Yeah, that's great. And for you, Nick, like, does that look like relative strength, relative weakness, or is it more like a
100%.
theme? Relative
No,
strength, weakness?
it's relative strength versus relative weakness. So for me, I've been watching Snap actually all week ever since they reported earnings, and they jumped quite a bit. And then we had one day where the market pulled pretty hard, but Snap held up. And to me, that's something that I look for, whether I'm long biased or short biased, right? I'm looking for the stock that's not doing what it's supposed to do based on the market. So if I see Snap holding up while the market's pulling, you know, I my immediate thought is, well, this is a buy as soon as the market turns. And the same thing works on the opposite end is if I see the stock market going up and a stock just not participating and maybe even continue to fade, that'll be on my watch list for whenever the market fades. I think that'll take a big hit. So it's always about adaptability, and you really have to go into every day bias free. Your opinion yesterday doesn't really matter so much today.
Yeah, that's great. And Cody, what about you? It was a busy week. We had crazy news with in the cannabis sector, had some big moves there. But other than that, I mean, what have you been noticing in the market? Themes, trends?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot that, like we was just saying, like every day feels like a new day and a new like paradigm almost in this market where you kind of don't know what to expect the next day. Whereas previous years, things were relatively pretty calm, even like from November until April this year. It was kind of relatively calm, but I even noticed like small caps just they didn't have that muster with the market like they used to have. And even if you look at like the small caps in general, they're still in a relative bear market versus everything. So, my big strength has always been like the cheap names and the names that are beaten down for, weeks and months at a time. So those are the names that I look at. But in general, the overall market just kind of seems like it's just on edge. Like that's the vibe that I get is every day you're like, what's today going to have that, is out of left field? And even intraday action with these 0 day to expiration options, it just makes things a little bit more casino-esque each day as far as
Another
moves
talking
go.
about 24/7 trading.
Yeah, and I think the 24/7 trading is a nightmare for somebody who's been doing it for 10 years. Like Friday, like at this time of the day, you're like, I always notice brains turn off. So if you
Yeah,
can't, if you
dude.
ever get
I
that
mean,
moment where
you do it with the crypto market, Cody, and I don't know how you do both because
and
that's
you just have no time to rest your brain. I think 24-hour trading would be a disaster. But
disease. I agree.
like it'd be one of those things where I think, it might be great in some certain situations. And I think it was brought up because the only thing to trade when you started hearing those rockets hitting, what was it, 2 weeks ago? The only thing
Right.
you could sell was crypto. Like you couldn't do anything else. So Bitcoin obviously got smacked because it was the only thing that you could be like, I'm going to short something if the market's there and open. So
Right.
uh, it's not something I would be fond of. Just from the aspect of doing this for so long and kind of understanding what the human brain needs versus what a computer algorithm cares about. And I think that gives them more of an
Leverage.
edge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
more leverage, more of an edge versus regular humans trading.
For
But yeah,
sure.
other than that, I would say things that I care about or I'm focused on are, obviously crypto. I'm always interested in the newest kind of like technology that's coming out. Right now, I just think interest rates are so high that people are not really in a risk on mood. So, like building businesses is difficult. So, it's just a weird time that even since I've been trading, interest rates has never been this high because I started in 2010, and for most of those years, rates were under 2%. So, it's a paradigm you kind of have to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a lot of adjusting and adapting because this is a new market. And I feel like when, hot sectors or like themes do show up, they show up in very specific pockets and then they very quickly sort out the good from the bad. And you just don't have these like broad based trend moves that you used to have in the small cap market, which is okay. But, it's difficult and it takes a lot of adapting. And that's something that has been difficult for me, over the last couple of years of moving away from that style and trying to go more towards either large caps or things that are trending cleanly, because, if the market's not providing it, then I can't really force it. So yeah, that's definitely something that has, impacted me as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it, like you just said, like I go after the things that have clean moves. Like I am not a big fan of like watching intraday action on the S&P 500. That's like it'll just either pull or it'll spike out of nowhere for no reason. Like it's almost impossible for me to like have any conviction on any names. Unlike during the marijuana news, which I was fortunate enough not to be downstairs when that actually came out, was it was an event that had been speculated for a while that the DEA was going to lower the criminal designation of what marijuana was, which is a pretty big news event in and of itself. And I think you had a lot of people get stuck on the wrong side intraday on that trade.
Yeah.
But like something as big as that,
I was one of them.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't hear about that stuff until like the weekend. So like I had a feeling, just because of historic things that have happened in that sector, it doesn't have a day two move. So I kind of just knew going into day two, I wanted upside risk, but I was extremely cautious. Like when I woke up in the morning, I didn't see anything gapping up. I just started selling stuff pre-market because I'm like, I just have a feeling it's going to get smacked again, because it has every single time. So like even Monday, I'm kind of more curious to see if there's a bid in it, because that news will kind of spread around. People will be like, oh, really? What, just the normal person understanding things can bring about a different change as well.
Yeah. And just to mention, to build off of what Cody just said about CGC. I mean, I went into, what was it, Thursday, with a long
Tuesday.
position, and thinking it would have a secondary move, and immediately it just flushed off the open and it failed to reclaim. And I think that something that traders, if you're starting out, it doesn't really matter at what point in your journey you're on. It's very important to recognize, okay, I was wrong. There's heavy selling going on. I'm going to flip my position instead of just getting out, which is something that I learned from experience. Is just cut your losses. But I think a step up from cutting your losses is being able to switch your bias on a dime when you know that it's not working against you. And I'm not saying if you're long 5,000 shares and it's going against you, you just take a 5,000 share short position. But I'm saying that you adjust, you reevaluate, you either size down, you get out, or maybe you take a small short, see where it leads you. But
yeah,
I think a lot of traders struggle with that, and that's something that's very hard to do is pyramid into winners, and that's something that I've been trying to get better at. I find that I take profits very quickly where I should have been adding, and I'll do the same thing when a stock is dropping, where I'll take losses where I should have maybe potentially taken the entire loss. You know what I mean? So it's more about preservation of capital, and when you're right, you press. And I think that's something that Cody did very well this week.
Yeah.
Was he had conviction on something, he had a position in it, he saw the movement, and he went all in. You know what I mean? And I think from what he said, he didn't expect a second day move. So he probably had a great trade. You know what I mean? And it takes screen time and it takes familiarity to learn these types of things.
And I think that's 100% accurate. Like even like an hour before that, I was just kind of tweeting like, sometimes it's the best thing to just sit on your hands and do nothing. And and it was just ironic that I had mentioned that, and that news came out within 15 minutes of that post. And
100,000 shares later,
and it was purely a reaction. Like I saw it, I had been waiting for it for months. And
but you have to have that as a trader. You have to have kind of a discipline at the same time as you have to have impulsiveness.
Yep.
And it's a very hard balance, which is why I think a lot of traders struggle with it. But if you can figure out that balance between being wrong and knowing when to press, it gives you an edge that most humans don't have.
Yeah. And I know Nate's even commented personally, he's like, you are either ice cold or you're red hot. And it's like,
Yeah.
Taking an introspective look, it's like, you're right. Like, I'm either pedal to the metal or I'm doing nothing. Like,
Right.
and even when that news hit, like, what, just from a risk reward standpoint, like, I think CGC went from like 8 to 9 within like a minute.
Oh, yeah.
I was enough to get to like the 860s, but I wouldn't have known to just be like, why am I buying the high of the day so aggressively? When a lot of people were like, oh, it's up again, let's short it. That was probably just reaction on both sides of that trade was, oh, weeds are up, I'm going to short. Whereas I was like, here's a big moment to actually size into stuff across the board, knowing that maybe it'll have a day two, but all I cared about was the rest of the day in reality on that trade. I wanted to have overnight risk, but again,
and that's another thing is knowing, how many traders have been bagged in the past,
100%.
and they'll
especially
look
on the same sector.
Exactly, and they'll look for any excuse to sell. So you're really fighting an uptrend, and again, that comes with familiarity of the stock. If you knew nothing about CGC, you'd be like, all right, this can run to 2025. But knowing how many sellers there were that were just trying to get out of the trade, I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, but it's pretty obvious in hindsight that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the CGC chart, if we could pull that up again. So there's a couple of things. I think that there's some really key things that people can take away from just that move in general. And so the CGC most recent move, the chart that you had up before, Cody.
So
yeah, this one. So you can see, you have, when the news breaks, this is a very specific kind of setup, like a breaking news setup, but for a sector trade. And so I know that, Cody, you've talked about using this strategy in the past, and I've used it as well, where you have these stocks that are in sectors that are just at equilibrium. They're at a baseline. And then you have a piece of important breaking news, and you can really hammer into these, because if the news ends up being nothing, it just falls back to that baseline. And so you have like a set risk off of that. But if the breaking news is actually really positive, you can get huge amounts of upside. And so the way that you really capitalize on that is by being familiar with the sector and knowing what news actually matters versus not. But if you, like Cody, know when the news matters and you have a sector with an equilibrium baseline and you get breaking news, you can either pile in with shares or with calls, and you can get huge upside. And so that's a way to really go long on some of these moves when they break out. And then like the next part, so if we scroll a little bit past to like the after hours, you can see that this is just like a slow motion version of a failed follow through setup that people in the room are looking at all the time. And that's basically where it goes from a sharp uptrend into a channel. It can no longer break out, but it does break below that bottom end of that channel. And that's a very clean failed follow through. And then you have that symmetrical move back down where it's just hammered selling. And those are some really clean trends on the downside. And so there's just so many lessons that can be had from a move like this. And no matter what kind of trader you are, if you're involved in something like this, if it's in play and you're a long bias trader, you have strategies for that. If you're a short bias trader, you could definitely have strategies for playing the backside too. But a lot of it was basically just being patient and waiting for the chart to clearly show you instead of forcing it. Because I know a lot of people were getting chopped up trying to short it on the front side, and then a lot of people were trying to buy the dip on the backside when the technicals are really showing that this was a clean symmetrical move, and then you had the news combined with it. So I thought it was just a great example to really highlight.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add is, especially with something like this, is when there's sector ones, I try to almost always find the leading name, and I think CGC was the leader that day. Mm-hmm. So like if I was to scale into, and I kind of know that CGC was, CGC and TraderWorks still kind of like I wouldn't say best in breed, but they still traded the best in that sector off the news. So like they were the first two names I looked at, especially like the Tilray calls. I think I got those at like $1.83 or something like that, the $2 calls. But then it's kind of like going down the line, like which one's next as far as would I take this trade? Has it moved a lot yet? And that was like my entire process for like that first 15, 20 minutes was CGC is going first, Tilray's next. I think it was like OGI, ACB, all those other ones that were in that sector that didn't really have the pop yet because the algos aren't, trained to like even touch those stocks. Those are kind of what I went after next. So again, it's knowing the sector, knowing all that stuff after just years of trading it, of like which ones, even over the course of 2 years as they're coming down, which ones are still number one trading, or if they've gone to pink sheets. Like TC, I think, and it's a sector I pay attention to. So like Trulieve is a big corporation that, especially in Phoenix, is one of the most successful. So it's actually kind of held this move as far as like 50% wise. Like it's still holding that $12 area, which is a constructive level from going 10 to 14. It's just a 50% retracement of that move. So it's still a name that I pay attention to, especially next week. So like, I know we're going to be talking about it, but like next week, marijuana names are still things that I'm going to look at kind of first and foremost next week, just to see if that move sustains or if it fades off and nobody cares, or if the consumers are so tapped out they can't even trade the stocks. So kind of a lot goes into just that first Monday hour for this sector for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay, so for the next part of Scan, we're going to announce the t-shirt winners. And these were people who left great comments or key takeaways in the comments section. So Jack8888, you've won a t-shirt, and Go Explore 318, you have also won a free t-shirt. So email webmaster@investorsunderground.com. And before we get into the main watches section, I have to say that none of us are financial advisors, and these are not buy or sell recommendations. These are for informational and educational purposes only. So now that we have that out of the way, does anyone want to kick off what they're watching on the long side potentially for next week?
Yeah. I guess I'll go first. Obviously, it wasn't one that I intended to, but like GME and AMC, obviously they had big moves today. So kind of pay attention to those. I think it's going to be more possible parabolic short, but still on the long side, seeing some of the call flow, you never kind of know what these moves can do. But just because it's today and the last 2 days, adding those to a watch list is I think imperative because of the sizable moves that they just made in the last 2 days. Obviously, the marijuana names, so like CGC obviously is going to be one of them. It doesn't look like it's held up as well as some of the other names. And also it's easy to add now, but also crypto. So iBit, I actually have calls on this. I started buying them 2 days ago because the trend that I've seen just from a technical standpoint on a lot of charts, whether it's a new algorithm or whatever it is you almost always want to buy the absolute pain points these days. And they don't even have the big like washout moves, but I just kind of realized once it broke under like 33s, usually this would mean it's a decent short. Over all the years of watching this top out, you'd think it would just kind of crack, go back down to 30s, maybe 28s. But when charts have lost this like key level where it's tap, 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 broke through and failed, it seems like that's washing everybody out now and it reverses. So even Bitcoin just in general, it was at 60,000 level. It broke through. People kind of got bearish. I started seeing people even on Twitter get bearish. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just start buying the options. And the only options you can buy, and people don't even really realize this, is Bido actually has call options. So it's a name you can trade call options on for Bitcoin exposure. You could also do MSTR, but their options prices are a little more skewed. So you're probably
a little more volatile over there.
Yeah. So you've been paying a lot more for premiums, and your risk is definitely going to be a little bit higher. But I would say those are kind of the main sectors. There hasn't been a whole lot else for me that I really care about, unless there's some news. I was interested in the drone sector, but again, not a whole lot's really going on there. I saw a lot of options in Katos for possible drone contracts. And you never know with those because if you're not in it and you miss the news, it's kind of an irrelevant play. But yeah, those are kind of the main areas. mega caps, maybe Apple after its crazy buyback. But those are kind of my main ones. Is just Bitcoin, the marijuana names, and possibly just backside drone names.
Great. And then Nick, you watching anything on the long side? I know you're mostly a short bias trader, but anything stick out?
Yeah. So the thing with being a short bias trader is I would classify myself as a short bias trader because I think that's my strength. Like I'm better at shorting stocks than going long stocks. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm looking every day to short stocks, because in this game you have to be extremely adaptive and you have to be able to change your mind. So I noticed that we're in kind of a bounce period ever since, the Middle East conflict and everything that's happening around the world right now. I think markets are kind of easing, like you said in the beginning of this episode. And they're kind of finding a base and building off of that. So I don't have too many shorts. I want to be very adaptive. So I would say that my long and short watch list right now is Bitcoin. So I'm watching, Mara, Riot, CLSK, all of those, different miner names, but I'm not bullish or bearish on them, right? I'm really trying to enter the week with no bias and just trade the price action. So, if we get a stuff move off the open, I'm happy to be short. It's not a trade that I'm married to. It's literally just me at this point in my career seeing price action and reacting to it. I don't think that I'm as good as Cody at recognizing trends and future movement. I find myself to be more reliable in just trusting price action as it's happening. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I really have, a long or short setup for next week. I'm going to wait to see what the market does. I've taken a step back, I would say, this year, and I don't trade so many names pre and post market anymore. I'll wait for 9:45 to 10 a.m. To just get a clearer picture of the chart, the stock market, and in which direction things are trending. I find that to be much more beneficial for what I'm trying to do right now. And I'm not trying to make, 100% on a trade. I want to be consistent. I want to build my account, whether it be slowly or steadily. The point is that there's constant progress, and I really am trying to enter every day, even like not even just Monday, every day, completely bias free. A stock might go down, it might go up, but I will trust my judgment based on my experience, and I will react accordingly.
Yeah.
And I think that's smart right now, because I'm kind of doing the same thing every day. I used to take feelings from one day kind of to the next off of like what I expected, but I don't think you can do that in this market, at least not in the last few months.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. And then Nick, you had a really nice long trade on CVNA after earnings, this past week. So could you just describe your thought process? Like, as you enter that position, like what were you looking for? And, are you still bullish on it? Or do you think once it's entering that channel, do you have, any kind of bias, or it's more just fade the edges until it picks a direction?
That's a good question. Mainly because I had been watching Carvana for a while. It's the first stock that I ever blew up on. So to me, it's like, it has a certain level of attention that I don't give necessarily to other stocks. And this goes back years ago, but like that doesn't go away.
Sure.
But I've noticed this stock holding up for a while. People thought it was close to bankruptcy, and it rebounded huge. I think it caught a lot of people off guard, and it was almost no shock to me that they beat earnings and the stock broke through 100. I called this in my scans a few times that I think Carvana was going to go to 100. I ended up shorting it during the 2 week, Middle Eastern conflict period and made some money on that. But ultimately, I do think this is going higher. I think a lot of people are in trouble with it. It's going to be an excellent short one day. There's no question in my mind. But I'm not going to be the one trying to guess the top. I'm done with that game. But it was pretty obvious to me with the short interest on the stock, the way that it was holding up, even when the market was pulling back, that it was primed for another leg up. So I avoided that short. I caught a little bit of the long, and right now I'm kind of hands off. It's trading at almost 122, and can it keep going? Absolutely. Can it drop $20 in a day? 100%. So I have no position at this point, but I'm gonna enter Monday like nothing happened.
Yep. And this pattern, it actually reminds me a bit of that CGC, that first day, but obviously this is a different setup. But on a longer time frame, it's kind of the same concept where it's like you have a period of consolidation or equilibrium, you have an event, it spikes, and now it's in that channel between 112 and 122. And basically that's like that potential failed follow through zone. So if it breaks down below that, potentially, you could have a symmetrical move. Yeah. Or if it breaks above, then it's not failed follow through, it's just follow through, and you could have the same exact thing happen again. So
exactly. So I'd rather wait for that to play out. I'd rather be late than early.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. And then for myself, to echo what you guys were saying, crypto is on watch for me, but possibly for some different reasons. Kind of like the macro backdrop I talked about. There's been some big moves with rates. There's been some big moves with the dollar and some other things. So I think that if we're on the tail end of this possible, 5%, 6% correction, I think that a lot of those factors were weighing on Bitcoin. And so I think if the chart proves it, if the action, confirms it, I could see us, possibly reversing in Bitcoin. We got as low as 55,000 or so, and now we're back up to 62. And I could easily see us going to 66, 67 over the course of a week or two. And if that happens, I think that a lot of the names, like maybe the miners, maybe Coin, maybe MSTR, could follow suit. And so that's definitely something I'm watching on the long side.
Let me ask you a question for you guys. Chris, I don't know how involved you are in crypto. Cody, I know that you probably have a significant amount of your net worth in it. But how do you approach these drawbacks, and are you buying the dips? Like, do you think this is going higher? Absolutely. Do you think a lot of people are potentially getting duped and buying at the highs?
Well, with anything you can buy, you can always pay too much for something.
Of course.
And I don't care what it is. You can always pay way too much for anything. Like people paid too much for Teslas when cars were, scarce because they were pretty much the only new car they could get. So,
well, one can argue that Bitcoin is scarce and will remain scarce, right? So is every opportunity a buying opportunity, or
no? Absolutely not. The best buying opportunities, and I think I've said this before, obviously, like I've seen just about every big move, and every time those big moves happen in either direction, whether it's the euphoria or the panic is always the place that you buy stuff. So in practice, it's a lot harder for people to do.
I mean, it's the same in the stock market though, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
For myself, I mostly I'm trading crypto. I think it's a very cyclical asset. I understand, the thought process behind it, but for the most part, I'm just using it as a trading vehicle when it's in play and when the theme is moving. So that's really what I use it for. So yeah, on the crypto side, I'm basically watching CLSK, MARA, Coin, MSTR, and that all is dependent on whether or not Bitcoin really starts to have the next leg up. And then other than crypto, I am watching NVIDIA. Just after this whole earnings season, you really got to see that so many of these other companies in AI are just basically like tag-alongs to this theme, but NVIDIA is just reaffirming that it is the go-to. All the capital expenditures that the large FANG companies are spending goes to NVIDIA, and I think that you're starting to really separate that out, and that will be continue to be a leader. So as long as it has relative strength, that'll be a go-to on the long side.
Yeah,
completely. I mean, as a short seller, I'm not gonna lie, I've tried NVIDIA, SMCI, different chip makers, Micron and AMD, and it's been a loser almost every time. Like it's so hands off for me at this point. I won't touch them short anymore, and I think we'll know when the time is right as traders. But for now, it's absolutely hands off. I mean, I think it dropped to what, 760s the other day, like 3 days ago, and now it's back almost at 900. So like it's sending a clear message that this is a strong stock. If you fight it on the short side, you're gonna get bent. And I think, again, it's better to be late than early to these trades. And I think NVIDIA, SMCI, Micron, AMD, I think they'll have their day. But there's no point in stepping in front of a freight train. And that's what these are right now.
And NVIDIA still has earnings at the end of this month. And so they're one of the last that haven't, really reported. And so I think that'll be
and that's huge.
A tailwind for them. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and it'll be a tailwind for that entire sector too, because
the whole
all I've seen is that you got Tesla investing. I think Facebook's adding another $30 billion into theirs, is what I saw today. So
yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I've learned over being a short seller over the years is you really don't want to short the
best performing assets.
The best performing, exactly. Like you want to stay away from that. You want to find the companies that are moving with it, but not as strongly with it. Like if there's a big green day and NVIDIA's flying, but an NVIDIA sympathy play is not reacting as well, that's the stock I want to focus on, not NVIDIA. I want to focus on the one that didn't react like NVIDIA did, so that when there's a weak day in the market, that's the stock I'm going to attack, not NVIDIA.
Yeah, relative strength and relative weakness. Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah.
And you can even see the difference from NVIDIA to AMD. I mean, it's pretty much clear as day that people want NVIDIA chips, not necessarily AMD chips. So that's where the money's going.
Yeah.
Right. And then what about on the short side, Nick? I know that you already answered that, you're not coming in with a short bias for a particular stock, but if CVNA were to break below that channel of, 120 to, 110 or so, would that interest you on the short side?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking constantly to wait for this thing to peak out. I don't think we're there yet. I think the way it's holding up today, I have it up right now. I'm watching it, and yeah, we're after market close, but I see the way that it held up. I see the volume. I don't think we're done here yet, but if it did have a big, leg to the downside with volume, obviously that would cause me to rethink my position and my bias, right? Because my bias right now is, I don't want to say it's 50-50 because I kind of think we are going higher. But I do want to say that I'm absolutely prepared for a fail. Like if it fails, I'll get out and I'll take a short position. And if I'm wrong on that, I'll get out. And that's what trading is. It's just being okay with being wrong multiple times.
And then Cody, what are you watching on the short side, if anything, or what do you think could potentially be downtrending?
I think as far as like the only things that I'm looking at in a negative view, and I had a list, but I don't think I've looked at them in a year, is commercial real estate. It's a weird situation because I think it's going to send localized banks. Obviously, we had a bank failure that seemed pretty quiet in the news. What was it, at the beginning of the week? But I keep seeing these massive, commercial real estate buildings in, New York and California that just are going for like 60% of what they sold for just a couple years ago, and like that's
Yeah.
Like I don't like going after things, but if the short shows itself,
So what would you do, Cody, to short that market?
I mean, obviously there's the regional bank ETF. It's been a while since I looked at it. I think the last time I really looked at it was, what was it, last year around this time, April of 23. But I'd start looking at those, but I want what I've kind of, and this is a perfect kind of play to end this, is with the marijuana thing. People kept asking me about it for months, and I'm like, I don't care. I want to wait until the news comes out, and I'll play the news. So
Exactly.
I want to like, why beat my head against the wall trying to play an options every week where I could just, maybe I'm a day late, but obviously in that case I would have not made any money. But like with commercial real estate, I'd want to wait for an event that is like a whoa type of thing. Like,
right. And that's why I love that quote so much, is that it's really better to be late than early.
Yeah.
All right. And then in the interest of time, let me jump on the last couple and then we will wrap up Scan. So for short biased, I'm looking at possibly GME after earnings. So GME and AMC both report earnings in the upcoming week. And so you're having a nice, rally into that. And we've had before with GME how they've ramped into earnings and they've actually gapped up on it. So if we get into a situation like that where GME runs into earnings, gaps up on it, and then it starts to fail to follow through or it looks weak, I think that you could have a nice symmetrical move on the downside. But on the same hand, if it gaps up and it just kind of stalls out like CVNA, then that will be hands off on the short side. And if it starts to ramp even higher, then I wouldn't mind switching my bias to that. So yeah, we've covered a lot of topics, guys. Yeah, thank you both for joining me on Scan, and we'll see everyone in the upcoming week. And just a reminder for everyone to like and subscribe and to share Sunday Scan with a trader that you know. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thank you, Chris. Enjoy your weekend.